everyone. Let's try this again. This is my second time going live. So hopefully this will work. I'm just going to write in the comments, make sure I can start to see comments. Okay, so welcome to Wellness Wisdom Wednesdays. Yay! Okay, so today we're talking about labels and identifying with our illness. So I wanted to bring up a discussion around this because I think it's a really important for us to start getting our head around the paradigms that we get conditioned to be in and programmed to be in around health and well-being and illness and disease. And part of that is the language that we use. Okay, so labels. Let's look at, I think there is a real benefit in getting a diagnosis sometimes for people, and also for sometimes labels. It helps us to feel like we're in control a little bit. It helps us to understand a little bit of what's going on. But I also think that we need to be careful because they come with a lot of pre-programmed ideas that may influence our healing journey. I also think that they can be very restrictive and not really support us and help us in the process. So the reason that labels have come about, if you look at some of the Eastern medicines and more ancient ways of healing, they didn't... Hello to my live viewers. Hi. If you guys want to say hi, comment in the thing because I can't see who's on live, and it's lovely to be able to say hello to you guys. Just chatting about labels today and identifying with our illness. So in the more ancient ways of healing, they didn't really label things. They sort of, rather than label the whole illness, they would identify what is going on in the body and treat that. And then we've moved from... Hi, Neve. Oh, how cool to have you join me. How are you? So, yeah, and we moved to a more linear, logical, left brain way of doing medicine and healing, and with that came we need a label to compartmentalize, to put it into an equation. So we need to know what it is to then be able to treat it, and it becomes an equation-based model. And it also comes about from the Newtonian model of the body. So Western and Eastern have very different ways of viewing medicine and healing. And in our Western, we see it from a very Newtonian, Isaac Newton's way of seeing the body as a machine and as parts, and that we could just take one part out and replace that part. Or if there's one bit wrong, it sort of reduces everything down to just the parts rather than the whole. And so that's when we're talking about, when people talk about holistic healing, they're talking about looking at the whole person and the whole being, not just one part. I think it's been a really important journey for us to go through. I think it has brought about a lot of advancements in medicine going through this journey, and what I'm noticing is that we're coming back into balance again and balancing both of these ways of looking at the body and healing. So labels have come from that, and I was talking about before in my previous video that wouldn't work. If we think about cancer, whenever we hear the word cancer, that comes with a lot of programmed beliefs and ideas and thoughts and experiences with the word cancer. And so for many, you go into fear. Cancer equates to death, or this awful really battle and fight for life. I was watching a documentary on some Vedic doctors in, I think it was India, and it followed their stories. Now, they didn't have a word for cancer, so they would treat the person for the illness, and the people themselves didn't even understand or have any of that programming that we get when we hear the word cancer. They just see it as an illness and they get cured, and they have a huge success rate in curing cancer. Because of that, it's just something, it's not something that they think they die of, whereas we have that belief that comes from that label. I think it's important for people sometimes to have a label or a diagnosis, because it can help us to go, okay, this is real and it is something that is happening in my body. And so it helps us to land into that. So I'm not saying that I don't think we don't need labels at all. I think for some people that it is really great to get that diagnosis and helps them to understand where they're at. I also think that we need to be careful not to identify too much with those labels. So what I've found through my own journey is many years ago I was diagnosed with clinical depression, and over the years, as much as I get that diagnosis, I treat myself for the symptoms or what is going on or why I've gotten that in the first place. And so I don't necessarily, when I was in hospital recently, they were asking me about my history, and I forget to tell them these things. I forget because I'm so not identified with them anymore, and I don't view them as part of my identity so much as just I'm out of balance there and I need to come back into balance. So for me, the depression was a way of letting me know when I was out of balance and where I wasn't looking after myself and how to come back into balance. The same with the labels and the diagnoses recently have helped me to have an understanding and to do more research and to go looking for more things. And also a lot of confirmation for myself of the things that I was doing intuitively were actually some of the remedies for healing. The Lyme-like disease or Lyme disease, depending on where you are in the world. And so they really helped and empowered me in that I had a point to start, somewhere to start to investigate and look into. And so that's where I think labels can be helpful. When they're not is like with the cancer, when we get programmed with things. Autoimmune is another one that drives me nuts, another one that really, really upsets me, that we teach people that their bodies are attacking themselves. Because the truth is the body doesn't do that. It doesn't just go nuts. It's doing it for a reason. For me, they diagnosed me with autoimmune for the TTP and autoimmune diseases for the inflammation. And underneath it all, there is this Lyme bacteria that the body's trying to keep in balance in my body. There is an overgrowth of bacteria in my gut and things aren't balanced. My immune system was suppressed, so all of these other things were coming to the surface. I had a whole lot of toxic overload from algae blooms and perfumes and shampoos and things that I was exposed to with being around people, that my body was trying to get rid of and trying to deal with. It wasn't turning in on itself. It just didn't know any other way. It was trying to do what it could do to save my life, and everything else, it was like, it's okay, we can sort that out after. So when this autoimmune gets chucked around, a lot of doctors put a lot of things into autoimmune without going deeper. They're like, okay, we don't know what that is, so we'll just put it as autoimmune. And for me, they diagnosed it with autoimmune because my sisters had autoimmune diseases, rather than really investigating what was going on. And so I think, we can use those labels and stop there and not investigate further and not go into what's really going on. And it can also be very disempowering, like with the cancer label, like with the autoimmune label, that it can be disempowering because we get all of the society's programmed beliefs about that. So what I've found in my journey is it is really, really good to just sort of put that label to the side a little and deal with what is actually going on in your body. Where is it out of balance? So I was talking a little bit about Eastern medicine compared to Western medicine. So Eastern medicine, when you're looking at a Vedic medicine and I've lost the Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, I'm thinking, what's the name for that? It's pretty simple. That they, a lot of the time they look at what is going on in the body. What are the actual symptoms that are being presented? What's actually happening? And treat that rather than treat a disease. They don't do so much of an equation. They rather treat the whole person. And so it's really good to start looking at our bodies from that perspective. Okay, what's going on here? What is out of balance? So for me, I could have this diagnosis of autoimmune TTP, but the truth was my liver was so overloaded, my blood was full of toxins from the algae bloom from the ocean that I'd been swimming in, and all these other toxins, plus stress. So everything on top of that was just too much for my body. And when we want to go even deeper, so I went down to that level, went, okay, those things need clearing. And helping and supporting my body. So I was able to then support it to clear out toxins. I was able to help it, to support it, to help balance it up and build strength back up again and clear my blood so that it wasn't going, whoa, this is too much for us. I also, at a deeper level, if we want to take it even deeper, so for my experience, my TTP, I was very close to dying. And for me, the experience was one from a soul level. Hi, Laura. So lovely to have you join me. Just talking about labels and identifying with our illness and how that can be good in some ways and very restricting and limiting in other ways. So, I was just talking about my own illness. And so if I went at a deeper level, I knew that I was having a choice point where I could leave the planet or not. And so I had I had two near-death experiences where I was starting to leave my body, had actually left it and decided to come back again. And so you could take it down to that level and go, okay, if the soul is ready to either go or stay and it's having this choice and it's preparing to go, of course it's going to have something go wrong in the body so that that can happen. And so when we go a bit deeper, we can sort out, why is that happening? Is that just a natural thing? Is there something that's going on? Is it a choice point? Is it just the natural path that your soul is taking? So none of that fits into a label. Also, when we look at illness from the point of view that it is a pathway and a portal, and I wrote a post about this morning, a portal to our power. And sometimes those labels can hinder us going on that journey. We go, oh my goodness, I've got this disease and this is the only way it gets treated. This is the only, we start to limit. A lot of the time we're told we can't heal from that, or it is a long, painful journey of healing, that it's difficult, that we need to fight it, especially cancer. I get really, really upset with the whole view around cancer of it is something we need to fight and we've survived and all of this, because I think we need to be conscious of the words that we are using. When we're fighting, we're putting ourselves back into those survival patterns rather than moving into thriving. And so I love Chris Carr and her view on it. She thrives with her cancer rather than seeing herself as a battler or a survivor or a fighter of the disease. She sees herself as thriving, and she's living this beautiful, full life, even though she's had cancer for a long time, many, many, many years. And I love that. It's like her life just keeps unfolding more and more. Okay. Everything happening today. All over the place. Back to the labels again. Yeah, the flow just stopped. Sorry, got interrupted. Okay, so yeah, so I think it's really when we get some sort of diagnosis or have an illness or a disease, what I've noticed is when it's something that is chronic, that we've had for a while, we can identify fully with that and become that, and it becomes who we are rather than just a part of our life. And it's not to say that we should disown that, because I think it's really important to accept and own where you're at. And I know for myself, I had to go through that. It was like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what my body is doing. I need to own it. I need to be in it. But so often we identify and it becomes who we are. It's like, hi, I'm Michelle. I have TTP. Or, hi, I'm Michelle. I've got an autoimmune disease. Rather than, hi, I'm Michelle. And so we stay in the energy of the illness or disease rather than moving through it when we identify with it. And that can be hard when you're living with a chronic illness, because it is chronic, because you are living it every day. But I encourage you guys just to think about it. How much do your beliefs and ideas, you know, when we talk about cancer, we've talked about it already on the thing. When I say the word cancer, what does that bring up in you? Does that bring up fear? Sorry. What was that, Laura? That's been my concern with my husband. Is that identifying with an illness or a disease? Not quite sure. Might have to clarify that for me. Yeah, and so be aware of what these things bring up for you. Like with autoimmune, what does that bring up for you? What are the messages you've received that have been programmed, that are unconsciously playing out when dealing with your disease or illness? Just waiting for I can feel you replying, Laura. Okay, and I think when we identify so strongly, we get stuck in the victim mode. So we get stuck in that this disease is happening to us, this illness is happening to us, it is something being done to us. And when that happens, it becomes out of our control, and we feel powerless to an extent. Yes, okay. So yeah, and I think, Laura, there is a process that happens. Like I noticed with myself, it was really important to own it, to be in it, to realize that that's where I am and sink into it and embody it. But it was really important to know that that is not who I am, and that it is just a process. When we think of a cold, you know, we don't have this idea that we're going to have a cold forever. We go, oh, we got a bit of a cold, we'll get over it, we'll be fine. And so if we can start to go, okay, all these other illnesses are exactly the same, they're just an imbalance in the body. Feel it limits him and stops him from moving through it. Yeah, it can, because we can get so identified with it. And it's really hard, because when we're dealing with an illness or a disease and we're going into the medical system, they identify you by that disease. So you become like when I was in hospital, I was the girl with the TTP rather than I'm Michelle. So you become that rather than the person. They don't see you as a person. They're dealing with your disease or illness a lot of the time. And so it can add to all of that. I notice a lot of marketing, like I really am conscious of how I market my sessions, which is not so easy from a business perspective, in that we are used to this pain point marketing. So we're used to, have you got this illness? So have you got depression? Have you got diabetes? Have you got this? We treat diabetes, we treat depression, we treat blood disorders, we treat autoimmune, all of those things. And I feel like that is part of the paradigm of the sickness industry rather than a wellness industry. And so if you notice, a lot of the wellness stuff coming out is a little bit more holistic and trying to look at the whole lifestyle of the person. And I think that when we get identified with those labels, Laura, especially like with your husband, it can be really contracting because the whole world starts to go, oh, that's what you've got, and identifies you with that. I found it really hard to deal with the medical system when I wouldn't play by the rules of those labels. So they want to label me and put me into a compartment and then give me the equation for that. And I said, well, actually, I don't want to be tested for that. I know what my body's doing and I need support in helping it to do these things. But it is outside of their model. And so that can be a little bit hard. I found the integrative doctor fantastic. She was able to step outside of that a little bit more, which is great. That can be hard too, Laura. Yeah. And it's really hard because everybody works on these diagnoses rather than working on his symptoms. So what is actually going on at his body level? What is actually happening deep within his body, and how can we get that into balance? And what is happening in his life that may be contributing to that? And so, you know, a lot of them don't know how to work without a diagnosis, and then they go, oh, we don't know what this is, or we're trying to find what this is so that we can treat it. And then in the meantime, you're just living with this chronic illness because it's not getting treated. So yeah, it can be really hard. And I do get why they want a diagnosis. Like I said, we live in this this Western medical understanding that comes from that. Hi, Christine. Lovely to have you join me. Comes from that understanding, from that paradigm of we need a diagnosis and then we know how to treat it. So it's equation based. We need to know that first number so then we can create the equation and the solution for that. Laura, another great, like you would understand with plant medicine, you know, like you can go into herbs and plant medicine and do it from an equation base. So this herb treats this and this is the results that you get, or it has these compounds so it treats these things. And yet when you're working with plants, they have their own energy and their own spirit and their own life force that they bring to you and share with you, their own unique medicine. And it might not be exactly what the chemical compounds would say that they're for. And so for your husband, it might be worth, you know, looking into what is going on in all these different levels and how can we help with that. Okay. Yes, everyone commenting about it and feeling he has to explain himself when he doesn't know himself. That's so hard. Yeah, that's really hard. I found conversations with other people the hardest. Also, when you're not well, the conversation of, oh, poor you. So everybody has their sympathy, which is beautiful in that they're thinking of you. So it's not about not having that, but there is this putting onto of you that you are ill or that you should know by now. Like he might feel like he has to explain himself and he doesn't know, and people want to know, well, what's wrong? Why don't you have a diagnosis yet? Or you should have a diagnosis. I've found that hard. People don't quite go, well, why haven't you been to the doctor yet? Why haven't you got a diagnosis yet? How are you going to treat yourself with that? And Laura, there's so much, you know, he can do, you would know, around the toxicity. And then, you know, it might be something that he eventually moves jobs if it's not working for him. But obviously that's not just something that can happen really quickly. So It's interesting because, Laura, you've brought up the paradigm around labels. Even when people are talking to us, they want to know the labels so that then they can identify with you. They can then understand with you, because that is the paradigm we live in. And that's why I really want to step outside of that, into what's actually going on, because sometimes those labels really just limit and stop us. I know a lot of people who, especially with chronic conditions and chronic illness, who may have a diagnosis, have identified so much with it that it becomes part of their life forever. They live with it when they don't necessarily have to. Sometimes it is our path to live with illness for the rest of our life, and I'm not saying that that is not a worthy path, but there's a difference between moving through that, like I talked about with Chris Carr, moving through that as an empowered person in wellness, rather than a victim who's identifying and holding and staying in that place. Sometimes we identify so much because the illness is serving us in some way. We may not be aware of that, and we may not understand that. So some people will stay ill because they receive a lot of attention and love. So as children, yeah, it keeps us in the old energy. When you think of, we've expanded, and as our soul's expanded out and we're unfolding, these are the parts we get illness where we're restricted and we're not expanding and keeping up with our own expansion. And so, yeah, if we stay identifying with it, then we're staying in that old energy rather than moving into the new energy. And I've lost what I was saying. That's okay. Have you guys got any questions or anything? Laura, I'm loving all your conversation. It's awesome. Lost it. It's gone. Thanks, Neve. So lovely to have you on here. Okay. I think that might be everything about it. So just think about the labels. Think about how we even think about how we address other people. You know, do we want a label from them? How we're interacting with them? How those labels are serving us or not serving us. Oh, I was talking about the illness serving us. So for some people, you might be in a really awful relationship. It's not working so well. And I know of some people that have some clients and things, and other people's clients that have been in relationships that were not very good, and they got a serious illness, and all of a sudden the partner becomes supportive and loving to help them through the illness. And so they stay sick because they're receiving that love and support that they really desired in the relationship. So they think if they are well again, that it will go back to how it was. And we set that up sometimes with our children when they're sick, when they're little, and we give them all this love and attention. And of course, as we grow up, we like, oh, you know, if we talk about man flu, that they just want that love and attention to feel good. And I know, you know, when I'm not well, like I want that love and attention a little and support. And so that, I think that's a natural part of our being, but sometimes we can get stuck in that and be using that illness to serve us in that way. So it's really good to investigate what's happening at our belief level when we've got an illness, and seeing what's going on there, because those things can be shifted and cleared and allow the illness to move on. Some of us don't want to expand further. So some of us are too scared to move on to the next step in our life. So our soul's expanding, our energy's expanding, and the human part of us is going, no, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that new job or that new relationship, or I'm not ready to move house or change my whole life, or leave my job to go into business. And so our fear will create an illness to keep us stuck there. and so that we don't, you know, we'll stay in that illness so that we can't move. We've got all of this going on. And so I see that a lot when people are ill, and it's from a lot of stress from work and things like that. They're not enjoying their workplace, and they get constantly sick, but they're not ready to leave the job yet. And it can be a journey to get to that place, to move through that fear. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we stay stuck in there for years and years and years and stay at a job that we hate because we're too scared of moving on. And a lot of the time it clears up as soon as we move house or move relationships or move jobs. All of a sudden we're feeling much, much better because we've cleared up the resistance that is causing the illness or having us attached to the illness. So Christine, abusive narcissist kept me so stressed that it did make my fibroid chills. But now that he's gone, I'm getting better. Aha, yes. See, that can be, you know, a beautiful sign of, you know, you're staying in that stressed mode, you're staying contracted, staying at their level to stay safe sometimes. And yeah, as soon as we let that go, all of a sudden this freedom comes into our body and flow, which is awesome. I fight to get better because I still have a lot of living to do. Yes. I'm going to encourage you to say, to get rid of the word fight, that you are moving towards or journeying towards getting better, walking your path towards getting better, or coming into alignment. Because the truth is, Christine, you are beautiful and whole and not broken at all. It's just... we move, you know, we're continually unfolding and expanding, and there are times when we stay stuck or we stay a little bit resistant, or there is part of us that's been missing that we need to integrate back in, and it's not because we're broken. So let's get rid of the word fight, because it moves us into the survival, whereas you're a beautiful, thriving being and beautiful woman, and yeah. Okay. Oh, I think that's everything, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope I've brought at least the discussion up for you and some thoughts around it. Awesome, Christine. Yay. Mwah. Yeah. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Neve. And thank you, Christine, for joining me. And anyone else that popped on that didn't comment, but I couldn't see who you were. No problems. And enjoy your journeys, and, you know, walk the path between, okay, maybe you need some identifying of something and a label, but then move into what's deeper here. What is actually my truth, rather than what's the world's truth about me. Okay. Much love, you guys. Have an awesome rest of the day and a wonderful week. I will see you next week. On Wellness Wisdom Wednesdays. Keep forgetting the name of my thing. Hi Priscilla, so lovely to have you join us. I'm just about to go, but you can watch the replay. I'll post that in just a sec. We had an awesome conversation about labels and identifying with our illness and how it helps us and how it can hinder us. No worries, Laura. Many blessings to your husband too. Thank you for sharing with us. Okay, bye guys.